She lived in a small village at the foot of the mountains, where the wind always seemed to carry whispers of fear and stories of the unknown. The village was quiet and simple, but surrounded by peaks that hid secrets many dared not explore. She grew up hearing tales about the most feared man in those mountains. They said he was harsh and dangerous. No one really knew what he looked like, or why he was so feared, only that those who went near him rarely returned. She often wondered how someone could be so feared, and what had made him that way. Life in the village was not easy. She helped her family with daily chores, fetching water, gathering firewood, and tending to the small farm. It was tiring work, but it taught her patience and strength. She had always dreamed of a life beyond the mountains, of doing something meaningful or seeing the world beyond the peaks. Yet reality was different. Her family depended on her, and their small farm barely gave enough to survive. One day news came that would change her life forever. Her family had received a marriage proposal from the man in the mountains. The message was delivered in a letter, saying he wished to marry her. She was shocked and scared. She had heard so many stories of him and never imagined that one day she would be asked to be his wife. Her parents insisted that it was an honor and an opportunity. They said it would secure their family and bring respect to their home. Her mind was filled with fear and questions. How could she'd marry someone she had never met? How could someone so feared choose her? She tried to imagine what he looked like and what kind of life awaited her. She had always imagined a husband would be kind and gentle, someone she could trust and feel safe with, but he was none of those things according to the stories. Her parents encouraged her and reminded her of the duty she had to her family. They told her that life was not only about her feelings. Sometimes sacrifices had to be made for the greater good. She wanted to resist, but she also knew that refusing could bring shame and hardship to her family. Though days before her departure were filled with anxiety, she said goodbye to her friends in the village she had always known. She walked through the fields she had played in as a child and felt a mix of sadness and fear. Each step toward the mountains felt heavier than the last. She tried to imagine what awaited her in that lonely and dangerous place. When she reached the edge of the mountains, she saw the paths winding upward and the trees growing thicker. The air felt different, colder and heavier. There was a silence that pressed against her ears and made her heart beat faster. She knew that beyond the trees lay a world completely unknown. She had never been this high before, and every shadow seemed to carry a threat. Her first glimpse of his home made her breath catch. The house was large and built from dark wood. It seemed to rise from the mountain itself, with walls that looked like they had withstood storms and attacks. She felt small and fragile as she approached. She wondered if she had made a mistake agreeing to come here. She thought about turning back, but she could not. She had to face what was ahead. He was waiting at the door. His presence made the air feel heavy. He was taller than anyone she had ever seen, and his eyes were sharp and piercing. They seemed to look right through her. She felt fear, but also a strange curiosity. He did not smile or speak at first, only watched her as if he was measuring her worth. He finally spoke, and his voice was deep and steady. It made her heart race. She could hear the power behind his words, even though he was not shouting. He asked her if she was ready to begin her new life. She nodded, even though her mind was full of doubt. She could barely trust her own courage, but she tried to stand tall. First days in his home were difficult. She had to learn the ways of the mountains and the routines of a man who had lived alone for many years. Every task was a test of her strength and determination. The work was hard and the mountains were unforgiving. She often wondered if she could survive here at all. He observed her quietly during those days, never rushing her, yet never allowing her to make mistakes. He was strict and demanding, but not cruel. Every action seemed to have a purpose. She realized that behind the fearsome stories there was a man who understood the harshness of the world and had learned to survive through discipline and caution. She had moments of doubt and fear. She missed her village, the familiar sounds, the warmth of her family and friends. The mountains felt endless and lonely, but in the silence she also noticed beauty, the way the sun touched the peaks in the morning, the sound of the river flowing down the valley, and the quiet strength of the forest around her. He began to speak to her in small ways, offering advice and warnings. Sometimes he would share stories of his life in the mountains. His words were not many, but they carried meaning. She started to understand that his fearsome reputation came from the need to protect himself and the people who depended on him. She did not fully trust him. But the fear began to mix with curiosity and a desire to understand. At night she would lie awake thinking about the life she had left behind and the life she was now living. She felt sadness and fear, but also a strange sense of purpose. She realized that she was learning something. It's important about strength, courage, and the human heart she knew that the days ahead would test her even more, and that she would need all her courage to survive and understand the man she had married. Day brought small victories and small defeats. She learned to chop wood carefully, to avoid accidents, to prepare meals with the ingredients available, and to move through the mountains safely. She began to respect the man who had demanded so much. From her she saw that his fearsome ways were a shield against the dangers of the mountains and the world beyond. Slowly, she began to find her own strength. She discovered that fear could be managed with knowledge and preparation, that the unknown could be faced with patience and courage. She began to see the mountains not only as a place of fear, but also as a place of learning and growth. She still missed her village, but she started to feel that she could belong here in this harsh and lonely place. The first part of her journey was one of fear and adjustment, but it was also the beginning of understanding. The man she had married remained mysterious and distant, yet she sensed that beneath his stern exterior there was a life full of stories and reasons that no one in the village could imagine. She had only begun to glimpse the truth, and the days ahead would reveal more about him and herself. She was no longer just a girl from a village. She was a woman, learning to survive and find meaning in a life that was entirely new. The days after her arrival in the mountains passed slowly and with difficulty. She had never known such isolation and hard work. She had to learn to manage the tasks of the house and the land she carried water from the stream that ran cold and fast. She chopped wood carefully to build fires that could keep the cold away. She learned to cook meals from simple ingredients. She had never felt such exhaustion in her life, but she knew she had to endure. Her husband watched her quietly as she worked. He did not speak much, but his eyes followed her closely. He corrected her when she made mistakes, but never yelled or punished her harshly. She noticed the way he moved in the mountains with confidence and care, as every step seemed calculated and sure. She wondered how someone could survive in this harsh place alone for so many years. Sometimes he would take her on short trips around the mountains, showing her hidden paths and safe places. She struggled to keep up with his pace, but she tried hard to learn from him. He explained which plants were safe to eat and which could be dangerous. He taught her to listen to the wind and read the signs of the forest. She realized that surviving here required more than strength. It required patience and knowledge. At first she was too afraid to speak freely around him, but gradually she started asking questions. She asked about his past, why he lived alone, and why people feared him so much. He answered only in small pieces, never giving the full story, but she began to understand that he had endured hardships that had made him cautious and serious. She began to see the man behind the fear. Life was not easy. She missed her family and the village. She missed the laughter and the simple comforts of home. She often felt lonely and wondered if she could ever feel at ease here. She kept herself busy with work and small observations. She noticed the way the animals behaved in the forest and how the weather changed from hour to hour. She felt herself becoming more alert and aware of the world around her. Her husband remained distant and mysterious. He spoke when necessary and acted when action was required. She began to notice small signs of care. He left food ready for her when she returned from long chores. He would make sure the fire was lit and warm before she arrived. He did not ask for gratitude, and he did not explain himself. She began to understand that this was his way of showing concern. Without words, the villagers would sometimes bring messages and supplies. They would look at her with curiosity and worry. They whispered about the man she had married. Some feared for her safety. Others thought she would never last in such a place. She tried not to listen, but their words sometimes reached her ears and made her heart beat faster. She had to remind herself that she had made a choice and that she must be strong. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. She learned the rhythms of the mountains and began to feel more confident. She could move through the forest without fear and perform her tasks with skill. She had scars and tired muscles, but she also had pride in her accomplishments. She had survived where others might have given up. Her husband began to show small signs of trust. He would occasionally share food or water without speaking. She began to feel a connection, though it was quiet and unspoken. She observed the way he moved in the home, how he kept his belongings, and how he looked at the mountains. She realized that he had a deep respect for the land and its dangers. She started to respect him for that respect. Sometimes, at night, they would sit near the fire and she would watch him silently. She wondered what thoughts passed through his mind. She wondered if he had ever felt loneliness or fear. She could not imagine the hardships he had faced alone. She wanted to ask, but she was not sure if he would answer. She realized that patience was important, that trust could not be forced but had to grow slowly. She began to notice the beauty of the mountains in a way she never had before. The way the sun hit the peaks in the morning, casting long shadows, the way the river sparkled in the daylight, and the quiet of the forest at dusk. She felt small in such a vast place, yet somehow part of it. She understood why he might have chosen to live here alone, why the mountains were both a home and a protector work. Continued to occupy most of her time, she learned to weave and mend clothes. She gathered herbs and berries and learned which could help with sickness. She learned to tend to the animals that provided food and warmth. She grew stronger and more skilled each day. She knew that the mountains had a way of teaching those who were willing to learn. One day she accompanied him further into the mountains than before. They reached a hidden valley with trees and flowers. She had never seen such a place. He told her to observe quietly, and she did. She saw the signs of wildlife and the care he had taken to create a safe haven here. She realized that he had a life beyond fear and danger that no one in the village could imagine. Began to trust him more. She realized that his fearsome reputation was only part of who he was, that beneath the surface there was a man who understood the world and who had learned to survive through caution and courage. She began to feel a quiet admiration. Though she did not yet understand her feelings fully, she was learning that life in the mountains was not only about fear, but also about understanding and survival. She had moments of doubt when storms came, or when she felt the loneliness pressing against her chest. But she also had moments of clarity when she realized how much she had grown. She no longer feared every shadow. She could navigate the forest and care for herself. She could see patterns in the wind and hear signs in the river. She knew that she was becoming capable of surviving and even thriving in this harsh environment. Her relationship with her husband remained quiet and complex. She saw glimpses of kindness in his actions and glimpses of pain in his eyes. She began to wonder what stories lay behind those eyes, what losses and struggles had made him the way he was. She wanted to understand, but she also knew that understanding would come slowly. She was learning patience as much as courage, though. Months passed, and she began to feel a sense of belonging. She still missed her village, but she felt a place in this mountain world. She had learned to move with the rhythms of the land and to respect the ways of the man who had become her companion. She realized that life was not only about comfort and ease, but also about growth and learning. She had survived the first months of fear and adjustment. She had learned to live with the man the village feared and to see beyond the story. She had grown stronger and more aware. She understood that the mountains had a way of testing those who entered them, and that she was becoming a part of this world slowly and carefully. The quiet evenings by the fire became times of reflection. She thought about her journey and the changes she had undergone. She understood the importance of patience, trust, and courage. She knew that the days ahead would continue to test her and reveal more about the man she had married. She was ready to continue learning and observing, to see the world from a perspective she had never known. She was beginning to see that life in the mountains could teach lessons that the village never could. The days passed in the mountains. She began to notice things about her husband that she had never seen before. There were moments when his stern expression softened when he believed no one was watching. She saw him tending to the animals with care, checking the traps. He had sat in the forest and repairing small things around the house without saying a word. She began to realize that the fearsome stories told by the villagers only told part of who he was. One morning she decided to explore part of the mountains that he rarely visited. She told him she wanted to gather herbs and berries. He nodded and allowed her to go. She moved carefully through the trees, keeping an eye on the paths. She had learned to trust the signs of the land. The forest was quiet and peaceful, and she felt a sense of freedom she had never known before while collecting herbs. She stumbled upon a small hidden cabin tucked between the trees. It was old but well kept. She saw smoke coming from the chimney and someone moving inside. She froze, feeling fear and curiosity at the same time. She wondered who could be living in such a secret place so close to her husband's home. She watched quietly and saw a group of children playing near the cabin. There were a few adults with them, and they all seemed happy and safe. She realized that her husband must be connected to them. She had never imagined that he had people depending on him in secret, people he protected quietly without anyone in the village knowing. She felt a mixture of awe and confusion, trying to understand why he had kept this hidden. She decided to return home and did not mention the cabin immediately. She needed to think about what she had seen. She knew that confronting him without understanding would be risky. She also knew that this secret was a part of the man she had come to respect. She spent the evening wondering how he managed to live in fear and secrecy, while also caring for others in hidden ways. Over the next few days, she noticed subtle changes in him. He became slightly more open in his actions. He allowed her to help with certain tasks she had not been allowed to touch before. She saw how carefully he moved around the cabin and the forest. He seemed to carry a weight on his shoulders, and she began to understand that this weight was tied to responsibility and sacrifice. One evening, he finally spoke about the cabin, though he did not reveal everything. He told her that there were people in the mountains who could not live safely if others knew about them, and that it was his duty to protect them. He did not go into details, but she understood that his fearsome reputation was part of a strategy to keep people away and maintain safety. She felt a mix of emotions. She admired his courage and sense of duty. She felt sorrow for the burdens he carried alone. She also felt a sense of guilt for having feared him so much before. Meeting him closely, she realized that life was never simple and that stories often hid the truth. She began to feel a deeper connection to him because she could now see the sacrifices he had made in silence. Days continued with the rhythm of work and learning. She helped in small ways with the cabin and its hidden occupants. She prepared food, collected firewood, and carried water. She saw the trust in the eyes of the people who relied on her husband. She realized that her role had shifted. From a mere survivor to a helper, she felt a sense of purpose she had never known before. Her husband observed her quietly. She saw the glint of approval in his eyes when she performed a task. While he did not speak much about it, but his actions showed acknowledgement. She began to feel that her place in this hidden world was recognized and respected. She felt proud of her small contributions. Forest around them seemed to reflect the secret life they were living. It was calm but full of activity. Birds nested in the trees, animals moved silently, and the wind whispered through the leaves. She realized that living in secrecy required constant awareness and care. She respected her husband more for being able to manage this complex world alone. For so long, she noticed that the villagers had no idea of this hidden world. She realized how easily assumptions could be wrong and how fear could mislead people. She thought about the stories she had grown up with and how little they had revealed of the truth. She felt a sense of sadness for those who never saw the man beyond the fear. One day a storm approached the mountains. She had never experienced such heavy rain and wind. She and her husband worked together to secure the hidden cabin and protect the people inside. She saw his strength and decisiveness in action. He moved quickly and efficiently, giving orders and guiding everyone. She realized that his fearsome reputation was not from cruelty, but from capability and courage. She sat quietly watching the aftermath. The forest smelled fresh and smelled fresh and slash smelled fresh, and the river had swelled. She thought about the hidden lives in the mountains and the courage required to protect them. She understood that her own courage had grown as well. She felt a deeper sense of belonging in this complex and challenging world. Over time, she began to understand the patterns of her husband. She saw when he was most alert and when he allowed himself to relax. She noticed his subtle ways of showing care. She realized that he had been testing her not to harm her, but to see if she could understand and adapt to the world he had built. She felt gratitude for the chance to learn from him and respect for his discipline and wisdom. She spent hours observing the hidden life around the cabin. She learned small details about the people. He protected their routines, the games, the ways they communicated, and the subtle signs of trust, she realized that living in secrecy required more skill and awareness than living openly. She admired how her husband managed this complex web of care and protection. She began to reflect on her own journey. She remembered the fear she had felt when first arriving. She remembered the long days of work and the loneliness that had pressed against her chest. She realized how far she had come. She could navigate the forest, handle difficult tasks, and understand the quiet signals of those around her. She felt a sense of pride and growth that she had never known before. Her husband noticed the change in her confidence. He did not speak much, but she saw recognition in his eyes. She felt a quiet connection forming between them, based on understanding and shared experience. She realized that trust and respect were growing, even if words were few. She felt a sense of safety she had never felt in. The village, the hidden cabin, continued to be a place of discovery and learning for her. She saw the importance of discretion and care. She understood that fear and secrecy could be tools for protection. She began to think differently about the man she had married and the life she was living. She no longer saw fear as the only story. She saw courage, sacrifice, and responsibility. Months passed, and her understanding deepened. She realized that life in the mountains was a test of character and strength. She had learned to adapt and to see beyond appearances. She respected her husband for the choices he had made and the burdens he had carried alone. She felt a quiet gratitude for being allowed into this hidden world and for the chance to witness the truth behind the fear. Her life continued with work, learning, and observation. She began to see the mountains not only as a place of danger, but also as a place of protection and life. She realized that her husband had created a balance between fear and care, between secrecy and safety. She understood that the lessons she was learning would shape her for the rest of her life. Through the discovery of the hidden cabin and its occupants, she had come to see the man she married in a new light. She realized that fear could hide courage and that strength often came with sacrifice. She felt a deeper sense of connection to him and a commitment to understand the world he had built around them. She knew that the story of the mountains was far more complex than she had ever imagined, and that her journey of learning and understanding had only just begun. The months continued to pass, and the woman grew more comfortable with the rhythms of life in the mountains. She had learned to manage her work, to navigate the forests, and to understand the hidden world her husband protected. She had gained a sense of confidence that made her feel capable and strong, yet the mountains still held surprises and challenges that tested her limits. One morning, news came from a traveler who had wandered close to the hidden cabin. The traveler spoke of danger in the lower valleys. A group of men had been searching for the man in the mountains, believing the stories about him and seeking to challenge his power. She and her husband understood immediately that action was needed to protect the people in the hidden cabin and the mountains around them. The woman watched as he prepared for what lay ahead. He moved with purpose, gathering tools, checking the traps, and mapping the safest paths through the forest. She had never seen him so focused. She realized that this was the side of him that the villagers feared the most. The decisiveness, the strength, the courage to act when danger approached. She felt fear, but also a growing admiration. She knew she would need to help in every way she could. Together they set out for the hidden cabin, moving swiftly and quietly. She carried supplies and helped with tasks that required careful attention. He guided her through the safest routes, checking each step and pointing out potential dangers. She felt the trust between them deepen as they moved side by side through the forest. She knew that survival depended on their cooperation and understanding. When they reached the hidden cabin, they saw that the people were aware of the approaching threat. The adults had gathered the children and moved them to safer rooms, while the older ones had reinforced the defenses. She joined in, helping with preparations, carrying food and water, and assisting where she could. She felt a sense of purpose and belonging that she had never felt before. The threat arrived in the form of loud voices and rustling in the forest. The group of men had come seeking trouble. She and her husband moved with quiet efficiency, guiding the people to safety and preparing defenses. The woman saw his fearsome presence in action and understood why the villagers whispered stories. She also saw his careful strategy to avoid unnecessary harm. He moved with power and precision, protecting those who could not protect themselves. During the confrontation, she learned how to act quickly and calmly. She followed his instructions, carrying out tasks that required both courage and attention. She saw that the danger was real, but manageable if they worked together. She felt a strange sense of exhilaration in facing the challenge side by side with him. She realized that trust had become the foundation of their relationship, and that respect and admiration were growing naturally. After the threat passed, they sat together, catching their breath. She noticed a quiet sadness in his eyes. As he looked at the aftermath, he spoke softly, telling her that every action he took carried a responsibility. He had lived with fear and caution all his life, protecting those who could not be defended otherwise. She realized that his reputation had been built not on cruelty, but on courage and careful strategy. Days following the event were filled with repair and care. She helped rebuild the small damages to the cabin and assisted the hidden group. She learned to observe small changes in the forest and to act in ways that would prevent further danger. She saw how her husband remained alert, even in calm moments. He taught her the importance of vigilance and preparation, and she absorbed the lessons with growing confidence. Their bond continued to deepen. She noticed subtle gestures of care and trust that had been absent in the first months. She began to understand his emotions more clearly, seeing when he felt concern or pride or fatigue. She realized that the quiet moments between them carried meaning, and that understanding each other went beyond words. It was in actions, glances, and shared experiences. One day they ventured further into the mountains to check the traps and paths that protected the hidden cabin. She had grown capable of following him icily, learning to predict the signs of danger and the patterns of the land. She saw his skill in navigating the mountains and managing the risks. He trusted her to act independently in certain situations, and she felt proud to be recognized as capable. She realized that trust was mutual and earned through observation and action. In quiet moments, she reflected on the life she had left behind in the village and compared it to the challenges and growth she had experienced in the mountains. She felt a sense of transformation. She was no longer the fearful young woman who had arrived. She had become strong, resilient, and observant. She understood courage, sacrifice, and responsibility in ways she had never known. The hidden cabin continued to be a place of learning. She observed the people her husband protected and assisted where she could. She learned the small routines, the games of the children, and the subtle signals of trust. She realized that living in this hidden world required constant awareness and careful decision-making. She felt a sense of belonging and purpose that strengthened her resolve. She began to see her husband not just as a protector, but as a mentor and companion. She noticed how he responded to challenges and how he balanced caution with action. She admired his discipline and the quiet way he guided her growth. She understood that the fearsome reputation he carried was a shield for the vulnerable and a strategy to maintain safety. She felt pride in being part of this effort. During evenings by the fire, they shared quiet moments of observation and reflection. She watched his eyes as he tended to small tasks and observed the mountains. She felt a growing connection based on shared experience and mutual respect. She realized that trust and understanding could be deeper than words, and that companionship could be built through shared responsibility and courage. As seasons changed, she continued to learn the ways of the mountains and the hidden world. Her confidence grew, and she found satisfaction in small achievements. She navigated the forest with skill, cared for the people in the hidden cabin, and contributed to the safety and well-being of those around her. She felt a sense of purpose and belonging that had been absent in her early life. She also began to understand the emotional depth of her husband. She saw moments of fatigue and worry and moments of quiet pride. She realized that behind his stern exterior was a man shaped by hardship and responsibility. She felt empathy and admiration. She understood that their shared experiences had built a connection that was strong and grounded in understanding. The challenges they faced together had strengthened their bond. She saw how cooperation, trust, and courage could overcome fear and danger. She realized that the lessons of the mountains extended beyond survival. They were about understanding humanity and the quiet acts of protection and sacrifice that defined real courage. She felt grateful to be part of this hidden world and to witness the depth of his character. The life in the mountains continued with its rhythm of work, vigilance, and quiet reflection. She had grown resilient and observant. She understood that courage was not only in action but in endurance and care. She felt a growing connection with her husband, based on shared experience and understanding. She realized that life in the mountains had changed her profoundly, making her stronger, wiser, and more compassionate through the shared struggles and the quiet moments. She had come to see her husband as more than the feared man of stories. She understood his humanity and the depth of his responsibility. She felt pride in her own growth and confidence in their ability to face challenges together. She realized that the bonds of trust and respect were stronger than fear, and that life in the mountains had revealed the courage and resilience within. Then both the months in the mountains had changed her. She had grown stronger, wiser, and more aware of the hidden world she now lived in. She understood the rhythms of the forest, the subtle signs of danger, and the quiet ways. Her husband cared for those who relied on him, yet there was still a part of the story she did not know, a part that would change everything. She thought she understood. One evening, while tending to the hidden cabin, she noticed her husband acting unusually restless. He moved quickly from place to place, checking doors, windows, and the small paths around the cabin. She followed him quietly, unsure of what had caused the change. She saw a tension in his eyes, a weight on his shoulders that went beyond the ordinary responsibility of protection. He led her to a secluded part of the forest, where the trees grew thick and the sunlight barely reached the ground. There she saw a small clearing, with old structures she had never noticed before. She stopped and stared, trying to understand what these ruins could mean. Her husband looked at her and spoke softly, telling her that there was something she needed to know, something that explained the fear that surrounded him. He revealed the truth about his past and why he was feared by so many. The mountains had been a refuge and a prison. His reputation had been built not just on survival, but on acts he had been forced to perform to protect those he loved and those who could not protect themselves. He had been misunderstood and judged by stories that omitted the sacrifices he had made. She listened closely, trying to absorb the full weight of his words. She learned that he had lost loved ones to betrayal and violence, that he had been forced to make impossible choices, and that his fearsome reputation was a shield against further harm. The man she had married had carried pain and responsibility in silence for years. Alone in the mountain stairs came to her eyes as she realized the enormity of what he had endured. She felt sorrow and empathy for the burdens he had carried. She also felt a deep respect for his courage and endurance. She understood that the fear she had once felt had been replaced by understanding and compassion. She saw the true man behind the stories. He explained that his fearsome image had been necessary to keep others safe, that the world outside could be cruel, and that he had done what he could to protect the innocent. She realized that the hidden cabin, the people he protected, and the secret life he lived had all been part of a greater purpose. She felt awe at his strength and sacrifice. She struggled to find words as the weight of the revelation sank in. She thought about the early days when she had feared him, and wondered how little she had known. She realized that understanding someone fully required patience, observation, and empathy. She had learned these lessons over months in the mountains, and now they came together in a moment of clarity. Woman felt a surge of emotions. She felt fear, sorrow, empathy, admiration, and a deep sense of connection. She realized that her own courage had grown through the trials they had faced together. She had learned to act decisively, to observe carefully, and to understand the quiet signals of trust and responsibility. She now understood him in a way she had never imagined possible. He looked at her with quiet intensity, and she saw a vulnerability she had not seen before. She realized that he had trusted her with this secret because he believed in her strength and understanding. She felt honored and determined to be worthy of the trust he had placed in her. She knew that the bond between them had transformed from fear and caution to trust and mutual respecting. The days that followed, they worked together to strengthen the defenses of the hidden cabin. She helped in practical ways, carrying supplies, reinforcing structures, and observing the forest for signs of danger. She also helped emotionally, supporting those who relied on them. She felt a deep sense of responsibility and connection to the people who depended on her and her husband there. Relationship continued to grow with quiet moments of understanding and shared responsibility. She observed him carefully, learning his habits, his ways of showing care and concern. In the moments when he allowed himself to relax, she realized that the fearsome exterior had always hidden deeply caring and responsible person. She felt gratitude for being allowed into this part of his life. One morning they walked together to the edge of a cliff overlooking the valley below. She watched the mountains stretch endlessly in every direction and felt a sense of peace. She realized that the mountains had shaped both of them and that the trials they had faced had strengthened their connection. She understood that courage was not only in action, but in endurance and in caring for others. Quietly and consistently, she reflected on her journey from the girl who had arrived with fear and uncertainty to the woman who now understood the depth of her husband and the complexity of the hidden world. She felt a mixture of sorrow for the pain he had endured, admiration for his strength, and love for the man she had come to know so deeply. She realized that her own growth had been inseparable from understanding his life and sacrifices. Hidden Cabin became a symbol of the balance between fear and protection, between secrecy and care. She understood that the fearsome stories were not lies, but incomplete narratives that had protected the truth. The people in the cabin represented the lives he had touched quietly and courageously. She felt a sense of humility and responsibility being part of this world. Months passed, and life in the mountains settled into a rhythm of vigilance, work, and quiet reflection. She continued to learn from him and to contribute to the hidden world. She felt proud of her accomplishments and grateful for the trust he had placed in her. She realized that understanding and connection were built over time through shared experiences and mutual respect. She often thought about the village and the stories she had grown up with. She realized how little those stories had revealed and how easily fear could mislead people. She felt a sense of sorrow for those who never had the chance to see the man beyond the fear. She knew that the truth was more complex than any story could capture, and that real understanding required presence and observation. One evening they sat together by the fire in the hidden cabin. She watched the flames dance and thought about the journey they had shared. She realized that the mountains had taught them both lessons about courage, patience, trust, and compassion. She felt a deep connection to her husband, grounded in the experiences they had faced together and the understanding they had reached. She knew that the life they lived was not easy, that the mountains demanded constant attention and vigilance, but she also knew that it had shaped her in ways the village never could. She felt stronger, wiser, and more capable than she had ever imagined. She understood that true courage was not in reputation or fear, but in quiet acts of protection, sacrifice, and understanding. The man she had married was no longer a figure of fear in her eyes, but a person of profound depth and humanity. She understood the burdens he carried, the choices he had made, and the quiet ways he had protected others. She felt gratitude, love, and respect, all intertwined, in a way that was both humbling and empowering. The woman realized that her journey in the mountains had revealed not only the true nature of her husband, but also her own capacity for growth and understanding. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and hardship, and emerged stronger and more compassionate. She felt that the mountains had given her a gift of perspective, a deep understanding of courage and humanity that would stay with her forever. As the sun set over the peaks, she held a quiet moment of reflection. She understood that the story of fear had always been incomplete, and that the real story was one of courage, sacrifice, and love. She knew that she would carry these lessons with her, that the bond she had formed with her husband would continue to grow through understanding, respect, and shared experience. She realized that the mountains had transformed them both, and that the hidden world they shared would remain a testament to resilience and compassion. After the revelation of his past and the weight he carried, she felt a new depth of understanding and empathy toward her husband. Yet life in the mountains continued to test them in ways neither could have imagined. The seasons changed, bringing harsh storms, long nights, and new challenges that demanded both courage and wisdom. One morning, she woke to the sound of the wind howling through the peaks. The snow had fallen heavily, covering the paths they used to move through the forest. She knew that today they would need to check the safety of the hidden cabin and ensure the people living there were secure. The mountains were beautiful, yet unforgiving, and she felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Together they prepared for the journey. She packed provisions, carried tools, and helped gather supplies for the people in the cabin. Her husband checked the paths and pointed out areas where snow could cause danger or where hidden traps might be compromised. She listened carefully, absorbing every word. She had grown capable of anticipating his needs and understanding his instructions without hesitation. As they moved through the forest, the snow made every step difficult. She slipped several times, and her husband steadied her each time with patience and care. He guided her through the treacherous paths. She realized how much she had grown. She could move with confidence and awareness. She had learned to read the signs of the land, the subtle sounds of shifting snow, and the footprints of animals that might signal danger. Upon reaching the hidden cabin, they found that the snowfall had damaged some of the structures. She and her husband worked tirelessly to reinforce the walls and roofs. She carried wood, water, and other essentials while he repaired the more complex parts of the cabin. She saw the skill and determination in his actions and felt a growing admiration for the life he had created in such a harsh environment. The people living in the cabin were anxious due to the storm. She comforted them, quietly helped them find food, and ensured the children were safe. She realized that her role had grown beyond being a helper. She was becoming a part of this hidden community, a guardian in her own right. She felt pride and responsibility interwoven with a sense of care for those who relied on her. The storm raged for hours. The wind tore through the trees and snow drifted in waves across the paths. She stayed close to her husband, watching as he moved, methodically checking for hazards and ensuring everyone was safe. She realized that courage was not only an action but an endurance, in facing fear with calm and determination. She felt a deeper connection to him through this shared struggle. After the storm passed, they surveyed the forest and the cabin. The damage was repairable and no one was hurt. She felt relief, but also a renewed respect for the challenges of life in the mountains. She saw her husband in a new light, managing danger with skill and protecting those who could not defend themselves. She understood fully why he had earned the fear of those outside, yet commanded loyalty from those within. The following weeks, she focused on reinforcing her skills. She learned to identify the strength of the snowpack, the behavior of wildlife in winter, and how to prepare food and water for extended isolation. She assisted her husband in setting new paths and checking existing traps. She observed his methods, carefully noting the precision and thought behind each action. She realized that life in the mountains required intelligence as well as strength. One day, a messenger arrived from the village below, bringing news of tension and curiosity among the villagers. They had heard rumors of the hidden cabin and were concerned for her safety. She listened quietly as her husband explained that the villagers could not understand the complexity of the situation and that fear often distorted the truth. She realized that the mountains were a world apart from the village one that demanded understanding and patience. She began to take on more responsibilities. She organized food storage, repaired clothing, and monitored the hidden paths. She realized that her own courage and resourcefulness had grown. She could make decisions independently and assist her husband in maintaining the safety and well-being of the cabin. She felt pride in her abilities and in her role in this hidden world. The bond between them grew stronger. They shared quiet moments by the fire, discussing the patterns of the forest, the care of the animals, and the needs of the people they protected. She observed his moments of vulnerability and strength and understood that trust and respect had deepened beyond words. She realized that their relationship had transformed into a partnership built on shared experience and understanding. As spring approached, the snow melted, revealing new growth in the forest. She and her husband worked together to clear paths and repair the cabin from winter damage. She helped identify safe spots for water collection and areas where plants could be gathered for food and medicine. She felt a connection to the land and to him that was both physical and emotional. She realized that the mountains had become a teacher, shaping them both. One day they encountered travelers lost in the forest. She guided them carefully to safety with her husband, coordinating the route and ensuring they were protected from hazards. She realized how much she had learned to read the signs of the land, to predict dangers, and to act calmly under pressure. She saw that the skills she had developed were a reflection of the lessons of trust, courage, and observation she had absorbed from her husband. Evenings were spent quietly, Observing the stars, discussing the forest, and reflecting on the lessons of the day, she began to understand fully that the fear she once felt had been replaced by respect, admiration, and a deep connection. She felt grateful for the trust and guidance of her husband, and proud of her own growth. She realized that life in the mountains was both a challenge and a teacher. Months passed with continued work and learning. She helped maintain the cabin, prepared food, monitored the forest, and assisted the people who relied on them. She felt a sense of belonging and purpose. She understood that courage was not just an action, but an endurance, care, and understanding. She felt her connection to her husband deepen as they shared the responsibilities and challenges of their life together. She often reflected on the journey that had brought her here from the village to the mountains. She realized how much she had grown physically, emotionally, and mentally. She had faced fear and uncertainty and emerged stronger, capable, and compassionate. She understood the complexities of human character and the quiet courage required to protect and endure. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment in being part of this hidden world. Through the seasons she continued to learn. She observed the patterns of animals, the signs of weather, and the subtle changes in the forest. She assisted her husband in maintaining the safety of the hidden cabin and caring for those who depended on them. She realized that the lessons of patience, vigilance, and courage were ongoing, and that growth was continuous. She felt pride and satisfaction in her contributions and in her understanding of the mountains. The woman had transformed from a fearful girl into a capable and a resilient partner. She understood the responsibility of life in the mountains and the quiet ways courage manifested. She felt a deep connection to her husband and to the hidden world they shared. She realized that trust, respect, and shared experience were the foundation of their bond, and that the mountains had shaped them both into stronger, wiser people as the sun set over the peaks. She reflected on the journey from fear to understanding, from uncertainty to capability. She felt gratitude for the lessons of the mountains, for the trust of her husband, and for the strength she had discovered within herself. She knew that the challenges of life in this hidden world would continue, but she felt ready to face them with courage, wisdom, and compassion. She understood that her life had changed forever and that she was now part of a story of resilience, protection, and quiet heroism.